All right, hello everybody. Welcome to the CAF News Podcast. It's spring here in Minecraft. I've shifted out my snow-capped mountains for a spring virtual background.
So
With
Kevin,
me,
you're telling me that's not a real place then, right?
this is real. It's Minecraft.
Okay.
It's really Minecraft. Yeah.
That looks
Yes.
cool. Okay.
All my backgrounds are virtual. At least, usually. Is yours? Are those real books? You can't like take one of those off the shelf, can you?
Yeah, actually I can. We're all about reality here. This is, yeah.
Oh. Real letters printed on like fallen trees?
It's nostalgia at its finest. The majority of my collection these days is on Kindle.
Yeah,
I use the Kindle reader because I can take it anywhere. But yeah, I still like sometimes you just pull out a book and it just takes you back 30 years, right?
There you go. There you go. Yeah. Are you gonna do like a rainbow color coding? So that you can be
No, I haven't thought about that one. That's so cool though.
It might help your, the influencer index might. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Well, let's get started, Kevin. This is
Let's do it.
awesome. Three things for today. I think really exciting topics. The first one that nobody can ignore, and probably a favorite topic, not a favorite thing, but a topic, would be the tariff wars and what's happening with global trade and how it's being restructured and what's the impact to us. The second topic we're going to talk about today is the rise of agentic AI and how, we're really seeing generative AI come into the mainstream, being, adopted in a lot of cases. And we're also seeing right now, of course, things like, agentic development kits being released by people like Microsoft, Google, big thing. And third, MCP, Model Context Protocol.
Yep.
Really big these days.
Yeah.
We're moving to mainstream with this now. I don't think anybody can say that there is a doubt that this is going to be mainstream technology.
Yeah, no, definitely. This is the way things are developing for now, anyway.
For now. And finally, we're going to talk about the re-engineered direwolf, and of course, what I'd love to get as a pet, the woolly mouse. So let's get into things, and let's start talking tariffs. So there's a lot of stuff happening with the tariffs. We're seeing supply chains being disrupted. I think technology is being impacted on a lot of different levels. One of them, of course, is with uncertainty. With uncertainty, temporarily higher costs. I think this has put a halt to some of, many companies' modernization plans and mergers and acquisitions. I think that's one fallout from this whole thing. And then I think the flip side is, how do we counter that? And maybe even more intelligence for doing things like building dynamic supply chains if we need them. And I think there's a real question there. Do we need those dynamic supply chains? What are your thoughts on this, Kevin?
Yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned modernization. It's also hitting monetization. NVIDIA took like a $5 billion charge. AMD somewhat less, but like 800 million. It is a chip war that's intensifying with the U.S. government clamping down on exports to China. And then the Trump administration is considering banning exports of any type from DeepSeek as well. So yeah, broader doctrine, companies operating in AI need to look at and align with geopolitical risk now, as the U.S. views AI as kind of a battleground, and it's
and I think people are going to try to shift to get around this. So, my first thought is, and I don't think there's an answer to this one, but let's face it, NVIDIA at the moment does not manufacture any chips on American soil. They've got plans to build a foundry, but right now it all comes from Taiwan Semiconductor, right? Mm-hmm. So is that something that the U.S. can really restrict? I guess they're really restricting the technology there, is what they're really saying, is they're trying to put a clamp on having that technology shift over. And surprisingly, from what I understand, they're also restricting some of the older H2s, like the H series chips.
Yeah.
Which is, I find that really interesting, that they're going to such they're really not giving them a route to grow, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Right. And like the price of those is plummeting because that was a lot of the market. So yeah, interesting. The trade war taketh.
Well, and that's the other side that's interesting that you're pointing out. The paradox here is the prices are going down but the tariffs are just making the difference. So that's very interesting that we're seeing that. And I think we've also
Oh,
seen,
interesting. Hmm.
and we've
Yeah.
also seen companies right now like Walmart have introduced end-to-end, agents to help them dynamically realign their supply chains.
Okay. Hmm.
I'm trying to remember. I have my notes here somewhere.
Yeah, for a place like Walmart with so many suppliers, so many sources in this kind of daily changing atmosphere of tariffs affecting pricing, you would need an extremely dynamic model to both
So yeah, so
track
Walmart's built
deliveries,
their new
prices.
supply chain on the Luminate platform via something called Blue Yonder, and it's automatically implementing dynamic rerouting of products right now, and it's based on AI, intelligent replenishment and inventory optimization. So that's really interesting that during these times of, because it's not the first time we've seen supply chains disrupted in the last decade. We've seen that with COVID also, right?
Yeah, yeah, sure. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there was a little bit more kind of one large event having ripple effects. These, every other day changes are maybe even more difficult for any kind of a system to absorb. But that's interesting, yeah, that they have a system that they're using to try and adapt.
And that brings us right to our next topic, I think, with AI going mainstream and this idea of thing like patterns that are coming out. We have things like the model context pattern coming out. That's it's out there. Like I am surprised in the I don't know what you've seen, but in terms of looking at some of the development posts, I've literally seen it go from nowhere to MCP in under 3 months. What have you seen there, Kevin?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, 3 or 4 months ago, like people were using the word agentic and it was kind of like, really, but what? But no, there's an explosion of tooling out there where you can define simple or more complex agents and then orchestrate between them. Um, yeah, and more and more of the models are able to reason and use tools, um, and the
And
costs
really
are
some a
coming
really
down
broad range
dramatically.
of tools. Like there's like you were talking earlier. There's the Google just released their agentic development kit.
Yeah.
Microsoft has a range of tools already, including tools that integrate ontology with building out, your agentic AI and your large language models. So really, a lot's happening there. Are you noticing like you're a little bit more in the developer space than I am sometimes? Are you sort of seeing that on the ground level? Do you think, Kevin, or what are your thoughts around that? Like the adoption of it from a DevOps point of view. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, you see certainly there's a whole like, underforest of small players really offering these kind of, here's a canvas, define a few tools and hook them up and, we'll handle all of the processing and run it all for you. you know, I think those are more sort of proof of concept than
Yeah.
I think you'd want to be a little more in control of it in an enterprise. But certainly interesting and great way for people to get an idea of what they look like, how they work. Platforms like Hunch, Relevance. I mean, there's almost too many to mention. I can't even think of them all. But yeah, that's definitely a big shift and what is happening. And the model makers are playing right into it with Google releasing that development kit and O3 and O4 Mini being able to reason and use tooling as part of their build. It's definitely and the pricing, not to mention these visual tools, but a pricing shakeup. 04 Mini is like 10% of the pricing in if you're using the API as compared to 4.0, and as good in reasoning and better in tool usage. So
what I'm hearing you
definitely
say, Kevin, I'm just going to translate this. So when we look at MCP, what we're really doing is you're taking a tool like a large language model and you're putting a layer between it so that every tool that you want to use with that large language model doesn't need a separate integration. It goes through this layer and uses that. And so what I hear you saying is that what we're seeing in the industry right now is a lot of people building custom MCP. Somebody will come out with a tool for ChatGPT. Another one will maybe do a DeepSeek tool that integrates a broad range of maybe tools that tie into the large language model, maybe introducing multimodal inputs, right?
sure.
Like,
No
the
problem.
visual versus and, other things like temperature. So you're getting multimodalities in there now. But I'm hearing that's kind of the current state of sophistication. And is that kind of what you were getting at when you were talking? I just want to make sure I understood it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. I mean, the interesting thing about playing around with these tools, if you've ever done any programming, you get told, write the comment first. This function does this, and takes these inputs and that output, and then write the method. That's even more important now in these tooling frameworks. You
Yes.
don't need to wire up like, you have an orchestrator and a number of tools. You don't have to wire up and tell it, go use this to do a translation, use this to do a calculation. You just make the tool and describe very well what it does, functionality, input and output, and let it sit there. The orchestrator knows it has these tools available, and it will reason forward to, I need something that translates. Oh, look, it'll read the description
Yes.
and use that. You're not hard coding. This isn't, you're not
Well, and
telling
this
it, go
raises
here
a
and use
really,
this.
Kevin, and you raised a huge
It's crazy.
implication here, like right now with this kind of tooling. I would argue that maybe today and certainly yesterday, we have this huge problem called legacy code. And one of the arguments to replatforming and rewriting some of this code is that there's a lot of embedded knowledge in that old code. That old COBOL thing has a lot of subject matter expertise embedded in it that nobody can understand until now. And I mean, I'm even starting to hear about large language models that are helping to interpret that code and build a knowledge base. What does this really mean? And B, how do we build test cases against this code if we want to rebuild it?
Yeah.
And so I don't think we're going to. So I think what's interesting in the legacy world, the idea of building functional parity is considered an anti-pattern, right? Because you lose the benefits of modern business models. But I could see far more use with large language models and generative AI to do almost a two-step approach, where you go from legacy, understand it, there's what it means, and now, of course, it helps with your continuous improvement, continuous deployment pipeline, right?
Yeah, I think that will be a huge use case and area for this. In any of the mainframe, let's get this functionality off the mainframe and put it into microservices or wherever you want those workloads to land. The huge stumbling blocks have been, is this code documented? No, of course not. And okay, who do we have that understands COBOL? Well, there's Bob. He's retiring next year, so I think there's more COBOL than Bob can ingest, in 365 days. And yeah, now that is going to easily be addressed with agents that just can go out, understand, break up the functionality, maybe decompose it for you. They can look at downstream dependencies, all that. I mean, that's going to be.
I think you're bang on. One of the things I've seen so far is the idea of using domain-driven design and the idea of boundaries, of context boundaries. and reverse engineering your old application according to those boundaries. And, you might use something like a strangler fig pattern and start moving your data, whatever you want to go, you have control of doing it. So I think we're looking at some exciting stuff. And it's interesting because I see two things happening going back to the tariffs now. One is this fear of, oh, what's happening? How is it going to affect my costing? And another one, which is a definite, and people like Kathy Woods have spoken about this, a definite downward pressure on more value for the dollar with technology, which creates a downward costing pressure, right? So your technology is getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And it's not just getting cheaper, $1 every 10 years. This is happening really quickly. So there's a trend we have right now that I don't think anybody's really understood. Like it's happening, this technology change is happening so fast, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't seen her comments. I'll have to look that up. But that's,
So her comment with ARK Investing, if I could paraphrase it, is that a lot of people don't understand the value of some of the technology companies right now, their capability for exponential growth, and how that exponential growth is going to be tied into wealth creation. So these companies aren't like, they're not like making tacos or something, right? Where you're limited by factory size. It's all kind of like these ideas. It's democratized, as Peter Diamandis would say. It's dematerialized, and so you're getting this rapid growth, almost exponential. Like, look at a great example. You look at NVIDIA, the rapid growth they've experienced, right? Palantir, even Alphabet, and to some extent, I don't know what's happening now with the possible breakups at Meta, but a lot of stuff happening there, right? So, yeah, great stuff. And then this brings us to, wow, our world is changing with all this, and soon. I don't know, Kevin, is this true that you've actually ordered a pet direwolf? I mean, I'm a little bit happier with a woolly mouse, but what are your thoughts? Are you going to get
the
one of
woolly
these?
mouse might be better around the house. Yeah. I might have to reconsider. But they're both cute.
They're both cute, and I'm sure the direwolf needs love like any other puppy dog.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's
So
kind
this
of
is
a
really
kind of a Jurassic Park thing, experiments in de-extinction as a service.
And really, what's cool about this too is this was enabled by large language models and generative AI to do in short time frames what we could, which is almost incomprehensible. So,
That's an interesting aspect of it.
Yeah, doing a little bit of research on the woolly mouse, for instance, I found out that they actually they're using what they call CRISPR-Cas9 technology to tweak two genes, FGF5 and MC1R. And what CRISPR-Cas9, CRISPR is cyclic, let's see if I can recall this, cyclic redundant interspace palindromic repeats. And Cas9 is a protein. So what it looks for is really repeating sequences in the gene where I can take this protein, like target it, or I guess maybe more of an enzyme, target this enzyme into the DNA and splice it at that point to put new DNA sequences into the gene. And so now we have this ability to do complete genetic editing. But what the large language models seem to do is provide the ability to understand three things. How does that relate to previous species, and what am I actually doing with this gene editing? So it's kind of nice to know. The big one is it can predict phenotype changes versus on genotype. And I first became aware of this research, quite many years ago. I think it was University of Saskatchewan or Saskatoon was looking at, with genetically modified plants, how does that affect their resilience and phenotype changes and function, right? So there's a second part there to that. And then the third part is, how do we compare genome sequences of a mouse to the woolly mouse to actually code it? And so I'm really wondering if we're going to see things like like right now, the state of the art is probably limited, but we're probably going to see more advanced genetic coding kits available, almost like programming languages. Like I want to actually program my woolly mouse today, but I don't want a woolly mouse. I want a woolly dire mouse. What do you think of that?
Yeah. Yeah, and are you building IP and,
Yeah.
in these techniques? I mean, I've been wondering what their motivation has been, this, colossal biosciences, which the name itself is kind of, patting themselves on the back. And what are they exactly trying to do here with this de-extinctioning? I mean, it seems like they're building momentum in the media before maybe really rigorous scientific and academic vetting. They get a lot of criticism when they
Mhm.
put these things out there. But of course, they're stirring up the debate and getting people to talk about it, and they're getting their name out there. So I wonder, if it's an IP angle that they're trying to build
Well, and as you're
expertise
talking,
in.
I get shades of Jeff Goldblum from Jurassic Park warning us about the dangers
Yeah.
of introducing these species if they ever do, what's happening. Um, what's interesting, maybe we can also use the large language models to start to maybe address the ethics of the whole situation too, right? Or is that a conflict of interest?
Well, it would depend what they were trained on, I guess. I'm not sure how
Yeah.
good they are at ethics. I should have thought about that.
So would you trust a large language model with building the ethics around bio research? That's a
I
tough
don't,
one, really.
I don't know. Is it gene editing or is it time traveling?
Well, that's a whole other topic. I'd love to get into the time traveling, but I don't think we've done much on that front yet. But maybe in the next few episodes we'll get into something like that.
Sure.
Kevin, great
That's fine.
discussion today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks, Bryce. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.